that in Nova Scotia we have the highest percentage of high school graduates going to university in the country. So in fact, Nova Scotians are availing themselves of the wonderful universities we have here, and they are doing so in very, very high numbers.
Member Kings West on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, my final question to the Premier is an easy one. When is this government going to realize that access to post-secondary education is key to Nova Scotia's future economic success and not a financial burden?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the government has acknowledged that as a challenge on assuming office in 1999.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Mr. Speaker, recently the Department of Environment agreed to test the biosolids in the lagoons at Inglewood Farms in Lower Truro for POPs, that's persistent organic pollutants. Residents of the surrounding area want to know exactly what is being spread there. They would like to be assured that such persistent organic pollutants such as chlordane and DDT are indeed not present or at safe levels at the very least. It's been almost a month since the tests were taken. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Environment and Labour. When can this community expect to see the test results?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Within a 2-week period, we should have those results available.
The Member for Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll put that in my agenda and get back to you. Mr. Speaker, biosolids can contain volatile petroleum products, heavy metals, and antibiotics. Since the material has been spread, the residents have told me personally that they've been experiencing burning in their eyes, chest, tongue, and lips. This is only the beginning, Mr. Speaker. More problems are on the way unless we get this right the first time. My question to the Minister is, will you at the very least rethink the testing parameters contained in your guidelines?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's good to point out that this process where the biosolids are being spread has become a pilot project of sorts, where we have people who are doing extensive testing, doing additional testing, and building up a database so that we have more information to be able to answer the questions that are put forward.
The Member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
So you don't
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, but I don't think the residents in the Truro area or the surrounding vicinity want to be used as guinea pigs in some kind of a test that the province is doing on a very controversial issue right across Canada, the United States, and Europe. It's controversial for good reason, Mr. Speaker. The residents just simply want to make sure that the substance is safe. They want to see the comprehensive test results, and they want their health concerns to be addressed. So my question is, will you place a moratorium on the process until you revise your rules to include better source controls and better testing?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to point out that we did a North American and a global review of procedures and regulations with regards to the spreading of biosolids. This is not something that was taken lightly by any means. A tremendous amount of hours and time were put into this to come up with the new guidelines, which we know are more comprehensive than the majority of places that spread this material. Also, I think we need to point out that the testing regime is also more comprehensive and is there to ensure that we protect the people that are associated with this product and to protect the environment.
Order, please. Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. The Honourable Minister of Education on a point of order.
Point of order. Thank you, Speaker. In response to the first question from the Leader of the Official Opposition, I referred to a press release and said that it had gone out today. It did not.
Government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call the order of business public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 64, the Capital Region Transportation Authority Act?
Bill number 64. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East, you have approximately 36 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did have an opportunity in the last sitting to talk on this issue for about 20 minutes or so. So what I'd like to do today is, I'd like to first make a few comments on the bill itself. It's supposed to look at the strategic transportation planning and coordinating of the various transportation responsibilities between the province and HRM. So, in essence, joining the province and HRM together to form this new transportation authority for the capital region. In the bill, there's talk of a board of directors, and that the regulations would come after the bill, and that they would determine the composition of the board of directors, Mr. Speaker. I do find that the document is lacking in, well, substance, and it's quite thin, I guess I could say. I did have the opportunity to be sitting in for one of my colleagues when the Standing Committee on Economic Development heard some representatives from HRM speak on the Capital Transportation Authority and some of their current transportation challenges. So I'm going to go through some of those so that perhaps people watching or listening or reading might be interested to know some of the challenges that HRM faces and why they were looking forward to seeing something being done with this issue. The population in HRM is getting upwards towards 400,000 people. There are different aspects of transportation that are controlled by different agencies, which makes this a little bit hard for you to get a handle on. The population has grown in the last 20 years by 20%, and they're not expecting anything to change drastically from here on in. The size of their fleet has actually stayed static, and even though we're going to be seeing an additional 75,000 to 100,000 people over the next 20 years, they don't really have any long-range plans for seeing more infrastructure. And even though there's been some twinning of highways and a new lane on the bridge, as I said, there's not been a lot of infrastructure going on in HRM. They continue to address traffic issues, and the level of funding, or the lack of funding, is coming from all levels of government. They have a declining ability to maintain the roads. They apparently used to be able to maintain around 80 kilometers a year, and that's down to 30. The state of the roads does have an impact on our tourist industry and our economy. And they did talk a fair amount about our ferry service and how our ferries were actually 20 to 25 years old now, and that the cost to just replace those ferries would be upwards around $30 million. The terminals, the ferry terminals, are 30 years old now, and that's something to look at in the future. At the point of amalgamation, apparently there was a plan in place, and there was supposed to be funding from the provincial government to try and replace 1/10 of those buses. Apparently the funding fell away, was cut in half. The program's now been cut in half. They did address the issue of trying to connect the issue of land use and transportation planning and how those two things connect, and address the issue of the regional plan, and that we needed to manage our growth in a more appropriate way. They talked about the issues of, when you're putting in roads, you also therefore have to follow that with infrastructure such as sewer and water, and then you're talking about recreation. And from what I could understand, what they were saying was that in the past and up to now, the government has actually not had a real plan as far as infrastructure goes. So it was more like the roads were put in, and then whatever followed. And I think we've all seen what's happened with the sprawl, and then you've got huge housing developments, no school for the children to go to. We've got the whole issue of what's happening with our school system. So they did touch on that issue, Mr. Speaker. So who does what and what's in the mix here? We're talking about HRM, and HRM has got their bus fleet, the ferry fleet, the Metro Transit, Public Works, and Planning and Development. We've got the Provincial Department of Transportation, whose responsibility is with the key corridors that lead into HRM. So we've got the Halifax Regional Bridge Commission, which is a provincial agency that reports directly through the Department of Finance, I believe, and the Halifax International Airport Authority and the Halifax Port Authority and CNR. There's an issue that they touched upon as far as control of parking. That's right now done provincially by HRM and by private ownership. So there was a small discussion on how that impacted transportation in HRM and the surrounding areas. They tried to address the challenges, and although we didn't have you only have a small period of time to discuss these things, what they want to see is an integrated, interactive, intermodule transportation network under one umbrella, and that's what they were looking for and hoping for. They think this would enable them to offer a more efficient transportation network that would also implement the regional growth strategy, the regional plan, and move people and goods more efficiently, and which would also support the environmental objectives. There was talk and discussion on rail systems, talk about perhaps a system coming in from Windsor Junction, Sackville, Bedford, Timberley. They did talk about the ferry system, and that they consider that to be the cheapest and most effective asset that we have, and that they thought that was a great thing, that we should take advantage of it. And so they did see some options there of running a ferry to Bedford, Purcell's Cove, Shannon Park, with that land now coming up. These could be boarding points to a new terminal in HRM. So when they talked to us, actually, Mr. Speaker, I think they did have an issue with perhaps the misunderstanding. When they apparently had first brought their vision and their goals to the provincial government, I think they were under the understanding that they would control whatever this mix was going to look like, and they were hoping to have a setup of 11 directors, which 3 would be councillors, 3 citizens, 3 city staffers, and 3 members appointed by province. And as I pointed out earlier, the bill, is stating that the board of directors would be determined through the regulations. So that's sort of up in the air. We might not see any members of the public on that. Not sure what it's going to look like. So I think that's an issue. Some of the other points that we need to consider, Mr. Speaker, are when we're talking about transportation is the spending of millions and millions of dollars on building new roads and widening existing roads to get from point A to point B a few minutes faster. And Mr. Speaker, we all agree that money needs to be spent to maintain and upkeep the existing system at the very least. But I think the province and HRM needs to take a long, hard look before they start jumping in and building new roads, new highways. An example of that is the proposed Highway 113. This is going to put a beautiful area of the province under immediate threat if that goes through, Mr. Speaker. My understanding is that the province has sold off parcels of public land to private developers, and they're planning on putting a 4-lane highway right through the heart of Blue Mountain, Birch Cove Lakes Wilderness area. Mr. Speaker, we should really be protecting these areas and linking more together and not dividing them and cutting through the heart of these areas. We're going to do that to save 8 minutes of driving. That's like $1 million a minute, we're going to spend to save a minute. I mean, is that, we have to really think about these things long and hard before we go forward on them. This is publicly owned Crown land, and people need to understand that Crown land is the land of the people of Nova Scotia. That's our land, and it's held in trust. The government holds it in trust for us and is supposed to maintain that and sustain that for us, for our children, and into the future. So when people in communities talk about issues that are dear to their heart, I think, you know, the government has to really listen to these concerns. This area of land is between Kingswood subdivision and Timberley. The area of land contains some of Nova Scotia's endangered mainland moose, Mr. Speaker. It's a beautiful area. There are loons, beavers, ospreys, and I mean, I could go on. 22 undeveloped lakes, and this is just a mere bus ride from an urban center. I mean, this is something that we should be protecting. There's not many cities. You know, we're becoming a bigger city all the time, and we need to protect these wilderness areas that are right there for all of us to enjoy. And you know, if you cut into them piece by piece by piece, it's so easy to put a road through, and then the next thing, well, you know, the road's there, how about a subdivision, or how about this? And next thing you know, you've got all these lots there, and then the infrastructure's not there to support them, and the schools aren't there. So you're creating this huge loop of things that are really, you know, hurting our landscape and our wilderness areas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we need to think about becoming a more sustainable kind of Halifax, HRM, and in fact the whole province. We need to encourage to move towards a transit-orientated development. We can do things here like clustering our housing and our commercial development areas around public transit modes. You know, wouldn't it be nice if you had a community that you could go to work in the community, you could come home, your schools were there, you could do a bit of shopping, there could be some entertainment, there could be parks, recreation areas. You know, your sons and daughters could hold down a job, jump on a bus, get to work. All these things that really, you know, keep a community close-knit. I mean, some of these subdivisions we're building nowadays, you can't walk out of them. I mean, you literally have to own a car to get out of these subdivisions. We need to design streets that can accommodate walking and cycling in a pedestrian-friendly way. I'm not sure, you know, how many of us have been on a bicycle recently, but one of us has been anyway. You know, it's not all that. It can be a dangerous thing right now in HRM. There's bike lanes aren't there. We're not making it easy for people to bike in the city. We need a network of bike lanes that interconnect with our trail systems. We need to extend our trail systems. We need to make sure that all of our buses become bike accessible. We need the bike racks on them. We need streets that have enclosed bus shelters. Again, we need to really encourage walking and safe pedestrian facilities. This is something that we can do for, you know, our health, our environment. You know, there's so many things that interconnect here, and I think that's something that government has to really think about when they're going forward on any issue, is that it's one department, and I know when you're a minister of a department, it must be hard just keeping a handle on that one department, let alone trying to think, okay, how is this affecting, you know, the health of Nova Scotians? How is this affecting all those other issues that surround your department? We need to bring attention to the areas around our schools and our public places, especially the downtown. Dartmouth is making a comeback downtown. We've seen some condominiums, we've got some development down there, and this is a great time for HRM and this new authority to jump in, build us some nice bus shelters, get the sidewalks going, some benches. So, you know, I think this is, you know, if you've got a vision and you've got some kind of a purpose, I think we can create all kinds of great things with this. We could even, you know, have some car-free streets in the downtown area. Mr. Speaker, one thing I would like to talk about is touch on for a minute is the accessibus, and I believe there's 17 accessibuses. I could be wrong, but right now there's something like a 2-week wait period to access one of those. And now, on top of that, you know, you've got persons of disabilities, various degrees, that have to book that 2 weeks in advance. So, you know, it doesn't really make for a spontaneous kind of a lifestyle, does it? And then to top it off, if they have to, for some reason, cancel that, then they have to start all over again. So I hope that when the regulations, you know, I'm hoping to see some more detail in the regulations here. So, Mr. Speaker, I think I'd like to just end with saying, you know, I think we can improve the way we supply transportation here. We can make services more accessible and reliable and convenient and comfortable for all users, including persons with disabilities. In fact, Mr. Speaker, you probably saw the story in one of the papers today about a couple that could not access one of the public transit buses because their wheelchair, I believe, was not of the proper type to be tied down once it got on the bus. Mr. Speaker, there are things we can do, and I know if we all work together, these things can be done. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for your time.
All right, John.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That's fine. Yeah, it's with great pleasure that I rise to talk about this act, Bill number 64, which is an act to establish a transportation authority for the Capital Region. The first thing that has to be said about this bill that's before us is how extremely vague it is in terms of detail. The section that outlines the purpose of the bill is very clear, and I think we would support that. It's talking about strategic transportation planning that's clearly needed in the municipality and, in fact, for the province, since this is the capital of our province and home to 40% of the people that live in Nova Scotia. We'd also be in favor of coordinating the transportation responsibilities of those two groups, the HRM and the province of Nova Scotia, as they relate to Halifax and the HRM. But the difficulty is that beyond that stating of the purpose and a reference to a board of directors to run or be responsible for this authority, very little else is known about it. It's very, very shy on details. And I think that this House needs to be alert and concerned when so little detail is provided to us when we're about to move forward and endorse a new entity like this. Because this entity could have widespread impacts, some good and maybe some not so good. We don't know who the winners are or whether there's a cost to the province, whether we're abdicating some responsibility by doing this, or whether in fact it's downloading on HRM. None of those questions have been answered in this, and the government hasn't provided any detail that would give some level of assurance to members of the opposition and to Metro members of the House who care about the city and the way it functions. I mean, we have had in the past some good examples of the province and the HRM tackling transportation issues that are of joint concern to them. And I refer to a few years ago when I was councillor for District 16, the Clayton Park West Rockingham area, and I inherited a situation where the Bears Lake interchange was an absolute gridlock situation much of the week. Not just on Saturdays. It was impacting the business community very negatively in Bears Lake, and in fact causing a lot of trouble for the shoppers and the people who needed to access that area. It was really horrendous, and when I investigated to see what the issue was and how it had come to be, it turned out that neither the city, the HRM, nor the province took responsibility for the situation that had unfolded. The province owned the land in that area completely, and so the city felt that meant they could wash their hands of the whole situation, that in fact it was a provincial issue. But, you know, needless to say, the province found that it was not in their best interest to spend money on this interchange because the major concern of the province is the flow of traffic on the 100 Series Highway, which was above it. So the traffic and the problem, which impacted all of the people that we represent jointly, whether you be an HRM or a provincial representative, was left unresolved. And I think an example like that, you know, it's terrible to let a situation occur like that, but we were in fact able to sit together and come up with a joint program where the cost was shared between the province and the municipality, and that area has now been opened with 8 lanes flowing beneath the interchange, and the traffic is moving well, and it was done in 2 stages, the most recent of which was finished last fall. So there are some really good examples of working jointly when the problems can be identified and the public's concern reaches a point where it cannot be ignored, and neither should we ignore it. And I think that we need to do more of that, and I'm not sure that the Capital Region Transportation Authority is the answer to these problems, whether an authority like that could take this and create the, I guess, the workable solutions that are needed for the people of HRM. The area that I represent, the Clayton Park area, is the fastest growing community in Nova Scotia. It's, at the moment anyway. I think there's a few other very fast-growing areas in HRM. And we've seen how quickly the traffic can overtake the existing road network, and how often the government or the transportation area of HRM are slow to respond in giving the needed improvements. And so I think there's a challenge to keep abreast of that. And I think that for the province, the challenge is to balance those needs of the growing capital district with the declining state of the roads throughout rural Nova Scotia, which I know you're very well aware of. Mr. Speaker, I think that there are a number of things that need to be addressed before we move forward with this bill. I feel that there is an onus or an obligation for the government to give more information, and I hope that when we hear from the minister and from the government side, we'll get more information to go along with this, because frankly, I am uncomfortable endorsing a bill that leaves all of the detail to regulation, and those regulations can be changed at whim, constantly, anytime a person, you know, or the executive feels like it. And I just don't think that shows due respect to the legislature here. I think all members of Metro should have the opportunity, well, all members of the House, but particularly the Metro members, which number about 17, I think, in this House, should have a chance to fully understand the implications of this legislation. And I'm very disheartened when I read through a bill that is so light on detail. I mean, of course we can endorse the idea of strategic transportation planning. That's a motherhood. Of course, it's wonderful. But let's get some detail on the table. And let's be more frank and honest with each other, because it doesn't build any level of trust whatsoever when we don't know the details and you're asking us to blindly sign off on this kind of an initiative. Again, we look at the structure of the board. It's unclear where the real control will lie within this board that's going to be responsible for the Capital Region Transportation Authority. Will that in fact be provincially controlled? Will it be equal? Will members of the public be able to speak up? Will they have a significant voice in that board? I know from earlier media reports there was certainly some dispute about HRM's vision of the board and the provincial vision. And I think we all need to know exactly how that would be structured, because the governance model is extremely important. It will dictate what kind of voice all of us, as either elected representatives or as members of our communities, it will tell what kind of voice we'll have when that comes into being. You know, I think there's been some concern raised about whether or not a transportation authority like this would be vested with powers that would allow it to introduce new or innovative methods of paying for our road networks. And I'm referring specifically to the possibility that there might be toll roads introduced as a result of this. And I'm not the first to have mentioned that. So I think it's important, just for the record, to ask again for some assurance about whether that might be a direction to go. Because an authority like this will divorce our legislature and the government, in fact, from making a decision like that. The authority would then rest with this board and with this new entity. And I think we need to know whether that can be a possibility and whether that's something we want to allow that entity to have the power to do. Perhaps it's something this legislature would like to discuss, and maybe that would be an amendment to the Act. So I think it should be looked at squarely as one possibility. You know, it doesn't mean that they might not be a proper answer, but let's have the debate, is what I'm saying. It's not that I'm opposed entirely to the idea. It's just that it has an impact, and primarily an impact on the residents of HRM, because they'd be using any of those roads. I wanted to mention as well bike paths and those sort of initiatives. In relation to the improvement that was made at the Bears Lake interchange, there was a very short segment of bike path put in place. And I think if we get with the program essentially and start to expand the use of bike paths on all of our roadways, all the corridors leading into the city, we'll be a lot further ahead. Now, I've heard that bike path criticized for being so short that the sign that announces it's there is very quickly followed by the sign that says the bike path is now gone. But I think what's important is it may be a short segment, but it's not short-sighted. I think all of the road works we're doing within HRM, within our municipalities, in fact, because there are other thriving municipalities, they should have bike paths included in their plans. And I believe that short bike path is a sign of things that could come and could follow if there's a bit of thought. Because really, if we start to put them in where we're doing road work, eventually those pieces will be connected, and there'll be an impetus to get the connections in place. And further to the issue of bike paths, there's a new group in our area which is pushing to have the shoulder of the road paved all the way along the Bedford Highway so that cars could come in from Bedford that they wouldn't be impeded by bikes, that they would be able to have the bikes on the shoulders of the road and cars would be able to move more safely, because the traffic has increased exponentially on the Bedford Highway. And I was only this afternoon was I at a ribbon cutting for a brand new subdivision that's unfolding in that Bedford South area. So we know that there are thousands more residents coming in the corridor between Bedford and Halifax. And that highway really needs to have something that would alleviate the pressure on it. I think bike paths are the way to go. So I'd like to put a plug in for that today as well, saying that any work that the province has some control over or some influence in, bike paths should be considered, because they are a longer range plan. And if we can do anything at all to alleviate traffic within HRM, certainly that will make it unnecessary for a lot of new road building. It was mentioned earlier today about the proposed Highway 113. And that highway, again, has become, I guess, back into the public awareness in the last short while, because there's been an addendum to the environmental assessment that's being done for that proposed highway. That was addendum number 2. The first addendum was in 2001, and the original environmental assessment was done in the spring of 2000. So now we're at the second addendum, which hopefully was going to answer more questions about the impact of this proposed highway. The highway is planned to cut across from the 103, from the road in from the South Shore and the Tantallon area on that side, across to the 102. It in fact saves 13 kilometers of travel time. And as was mentioned by the member from Dartmouth, it also shaves off 8 or 9 minutes of travel time. And when you read through the environmental assessment and information about the highway, it seems that this is largely in relation to truck traffic. And I had the opportunity to speak to a number of people from the Department of Transportation, asking them what the original rationale was for this proposed highway, because it has in fact been something that's been considered for more than 10 years now. I think it was hard to put an inception date to it, but it was said to be on the planning stages before 1991. So it's definitely been in the province's sight for a number of years, for a dozen years or more, and yet the rationale, in my opinion, seems very weak for this highway. If, in fact, it's 13 kilometers and a savings of 8 or 9 minutes, it suggests to me that we're talking about an economic imperative or rationale for doing this highway. And I think that when you measure the economic benefit against the destruction of the natural environment and the, I think, inappropriate use in this case of Crown lands and public lands, I think that the damage far outweighs any benefit that I've heard of. I know that it will impact a number of areas. It would certainly impact, my colleague across the way, it would impact the Bedford riding as well, Hammonds Plains and others. And I think it needs to be very clearly studied and looked at. The rationale is very weak, and I challenge the government to have a closer look at making a case for it. Explain to the public why it's needed. If there's a strong case, I think you'll get somewhere. But right now, the way it's defined, it can be so easily dismissed as 8 or 9 minutes of travel time. It's not very compelling. Again, the members of the public have been very concerned about this highway for a number of years, and over those years, since 1991 till now, there's been a number of different alignments proposed. And the reason for that is development has been overtaking the alignments as they're planned, and the land was never secured, so we keep moving the site. At the moment, it's a 9.9 kilometer highway as proposed. If it goes to 10 kilometers, it becomes it becomes the length at which you'd have to go to a Class 2 environmental assessment. That means a more thorough environmental assessment would be required. In fact, it'll allow more time for consideration and more opportunity for input. And although I raised this issue with members of the Department of Transportation, they said that's honestly just the way it's laid out. However, it leaves questions in the minds of the public because it just looks too convenient that the highway measures 9.9 kilometers when in fact an extra tenth of a kilometer would kick into place another level of environmental assessment. And again, it's part of good communication with the public to explain why exactly this is, because it leads to questions and it leads to a level of distrust. And as members of the House are well aware, if there isn't good communication, then people definitely reach their own conclusions. And in this case, without a doubt, the public have taken a keen interest in the Birch Cove and Blue Mountain area. It is one of our last remaining pieces of Crown land that is not encumbered by logging and mineral rights. I mean, a vast majority of our Crown land is really not available for public use. And since that piece of land has no encumbrances on it, since it's allowed to remain natural, it becomes tremendously valuable to the people of HRM. And within a very short distance, in fact, it was mentioned that perhaps this is within a bus ride of many people. I would suggest it's within walking distance of thousands of people, because all of the residents in Clayton Park West need only walk across through this wonderful new interchange at Bears Lake, which has a sidewalk now, and reach Kent Building Supplies, and you can walk into that natural land from there. And all the lands behind Bears Lake Business Park are part of this natural land. Now, within that, there are some parcels that are privately held, no question about it. But what we feel is that the Crown lands in that area need to be preserved. And taking a corridor of the size that would be required to build a 4-lane highway and allow for future growth on that highway is just not reasonable in the context of the growth that all of these areas surrounding the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes area have currently experienced. They've certainly been stressed by rapid growth. In the case of Clayton Park West, we're very pleased with the community that's developed, but it is a densely populated community. And the biggest issue I hear over and over again is let's show some foresight and let's preserve the public lands that are around us for future use. And I would challenge you to think back, 200 years ago when they laid out the Halifax Peninsula, who had the good foresight to leave so much land where Point Pleasant Park is today. Somebody did that when there seemed to be ample land available. There was no question of there being ample land, and yet they took a large portion of it and said this will remain wild, remain public. And I'm saying now we're in a whole new stage of development in Halifax and in HRM, and we're seeing tremendous development in the Bedford area, in Hammonds Plains, in Timberley. I've sat on council when large new developments have been approved for those areas and continue to be, unfolding. And I believe that we need to look ahead to the lands that are available to us, those public and Crown lands that are on the doorstep of these very big subdivisions and places where thousands of people dwell, and leave the natural land in place as showing a vision and some leadership really for the future, because future generations will look back and say that was an amazing thing, that people actually had the foresight to stop this massive rapid development and hold a piece in trust. And I think that's what the community is just saying, is that measuring that passion for the environment, looking at that area with its lakes and waterways, it's certainly very, very sensitive area. It's been identified that in the regional plan as an environmentally sensitive area. It's got beautiful vistas and it has a lot of wildlife. And again, it has been said that there are mainland moose in that area. That's written in the environmental assessment. Now I have to say that in the plan for this Highway 113, it is proposed that they'll put a tunnel in under the highway so that the moose can continue to travel between the Crown lands on either side of the highway. But that seems to me to be counterintuitive, because in fact, Mr. Speaker, the The moose are very reclusive creatures, as those of you that live in the country know. They're rare to be seen, and they're not going to be taking regular trips between, or any corridor that goes under a highway. In fact, this will drive them out of that land because it will become too noisy and too populated and too polluted. So really, it's not a solution. I think it pays lip service to the need to address how we might make this land livable for them, but it flies in the face of their natural habitat and the natural way that they like to, and these animals live. So I really don't think that the tunnel under the highway is the answer, and I hope that a lot of people have said so in their reply to the environmental assessment. This area, the Birch Cove Lakes, Blue Mountain area, has been proposed in previous years as a possible provincial park. And there are a number of documents that have touched on that or looked at it as a possible area for protection under our Protected Areas Act as well. So I think that before we consider any highway there, that needs to be considered. And again, the wishes and concerns of those thousands of people that live on the doorstep of this land need to be taken into consideration. And as long as we're talking about that 113 as a corridor or an avenue in or out of the city, it has to be said as well that because it's cutting between two of the 100 series highways, I don't see this working to direct any traffic off our existing road network. There may be one proposed entrance. I understand there could be an interchange at Kingswood, but I still believe that the traffic we're talking about principally is the truck traffic, and truck traffic isn't on the Hammonds Plains Road today. Yeah. The provincial park idea, I think, needs to definitely be given a lot more consideration. And I would really call on both the Minister of Transport and the Minister of the Environment to look again at that entire highway. I understand it's still proposed for some time well out in the future, but I just think that there'd be a collective sigh of relief if the fact were faced that the $30 million that it's proposed at today, and we know that figure was coined at least 5 years ago, if that figure if that road were to be built today, I'm sure it'd be double that from what I've seen with the increases in paving that we're finding from all of the roads in HRM. In fact, it could be double. In fact, it could be a toll road, although I doubt that. But you never know. Again, if this transportation authority comes into play, it could very well be. That could be an opportunity for that authority to take charge of this project. But I think that it's very important to leave these decisions in the hands of the legislature and in the hands of government. And I'm not sure that it's a good idea to allow ourselves to divest the control to a separate authority that has very little accountability to government. And I think that we should all be concerned about that unless we understand fully what the intent is. I go back to the fact that you don't build trust by presenting bills with very little meat on them. I just think that they don't give us any sense of the mission. We don't know who's responsible. We don't know if the province stands to gain or lose. We know that the bridges currently are very lucrative, and we don't know who's going to reap those benefits once this authority steps into place. So the questions remain unanswered in every area, in busing, ferries, transit, just how much would come under this authority. So I'd like to raise those issues and really appeal to the government to become much more visionary in terms of what they're doing, and let us know where's the leadership, where's the vision for this new road. In terms of other new initiatives, I think that we should be told what the bigger intent is of this bill before it goes forward. And I don't know whether I have any hope in hell of seeing such a thing, Mr. Speaker, but I am asking if it couldn't be provided to the members of this House so that we can all have a clearer understanding. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I think that I will take my seat. Thank you very much.
Recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to join the debate this evening on this important piece of legislation. And I have a few things I want to say about it. And I have to say, I guess I will begin by saying that I found myself nodding with agreement as the previous member was speaking. Specifically, I guess more specifically on the pieces of the legislation that are really are just absent. They don't exist within the bill. I mean, there's so little in this bill that it's hard to tell exactly what it is that this body, this mechanism, is going to be responsible for if this piece of legislation should ever, in fact, pass through the House of Assembly. I am hopeful that the government will see the error of its ways and withdraw this piece of legislation. It's badly in need, Mr. Speaker, of significant work. I don't think that it behooves anyone. I mean, I suppose we could say that there can be work done on it in committee, and that some of those imperfections can be worked out. And I suppose that's true, but it would take a lot of work, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, the entire authority with respect to this organization is not included in the bill. We have no idea what they're going to be. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, I wonder if you'd agree to an introduction.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to bring the attention to the East Gallery and to two visitors we have in the House today. My brother and his wife, so Kevin and Teresa, who are off on vacation, I think on their way home by the look of it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask them to stand and receive the warm welcome of this House.
Thank you, and indeed, welcome to all members in the gallery today. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and also extend our welcome to the host this evening. We are engaged in the Capital Region Transportation Authority, a potentially very important piece of legislation. I'm sure you'll enjoy the debate. I think I was engaged in saying that, for example, Mr. Speaker, that one of the sections of this act specifically provides that that after consultation with the municipality, the government will enact regulations with respect to the role and power of the authority. Well, that's as you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, has the potential to be incredibly expansive kinds of regulations, and I worry about it. I worry about it because this is going to be looking after potentially the future infrastructure needs of the regional municipality. That, of course, potentially includes the bridges. Mr. Speaker, the Bridge Commission would be rolled in. I see the minister shaking his head, I wonder about that because the Bridge Commission, after many years of struggling, has reached a point where it is above break even. It's making money. Its performance has improved considerably. I know Mr. Smith quite well. In fact, many would know he used to be the clerk over at the Dartmouth City Council when I served on council there, and he's an individual who has certainly my confidence. Mr. Schneider, who was there, happens to live down the street from me. So I know these individuals quite well, and I know that Nova Scotians can feel quite confident in their administration of the Bridge Commission, just simply by virtue of their past performance. So I worry when I see what's going on around the world with pieces of infrastructure like the bridges. I'm led to believe that in some places, governments that have been strapped for money have fallen prey to the siren song of quick cash and large financing companies have come in and they have bought up the bridges. They have paid out the provinces or the jurisdictions and have taken control of the bridges, and in return, of course, they control the tolls that go on those pieces of infrastructure. That's something that would be wholly, I believe, wholly unacceptable to this legislature, wholly unacceptable to the people of Nova Scotia, and not something that I would like to cede the power to anyone else to do, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not saying that the municipality has that intention. I'm simply saying that when you cede responsibility for pieces of infrastructure to other bodies, then you open up the potential for that kind of activity. I believe that the real onus here should be on the Department of Transportation and Public Works. I think there should be a comprehensive transportation plan, not just for HRM, but indeed for the entire province. The people of Nova Scotia ought to have the opportunity in advance, instead of just seeing a piece of pavement show up in their neighborhood. They ought to know in advance what the plans of the Department of Transportation and Public Works are, so that they can have a fair opportunity for input. And as you know, Mr. Speaker, one of the positions that this party has taken now for some considerable time is that there would be an open, transparent list of the projects that are going to go ahead from the Department of Transportation and Public Works, that the criteria on which that list would be generated would be known, would be open to public scrutiny and to public input, and that's the kind of transparent kind of plan for transportation in this province that the government would do well to come ahead with, rather than simply transferring the responsibility for that, whether it's in the capital region or elsewhere, to some other body. And that's, so, Mr. Speaker, that's at a very fundamental level one of the difficulties that I have with this piece of legislation. I had an opportunity to review the transcript of the appearance of municipal officials before the Economic Development Committee. You may know, Mr. Speaker, that there was an appearance there to talk about the Capital District Transportation Authority and its intent. And I found that really it was not what I would consider to be a particularly strong performance in terms of outlining what the expectations of that authority would be, what kind of planning mechanism for it was going to be in place, and many of us who have been around for a while in metropolitan Halifax, Dartmouth, and active in political life, of course, have know that there have been other regional planning bodies that have been in place, far before the present regional municipality, and some of which have dealt with transportation issues. I think of the Metropolitan Authority when it was in place. Now, granted, that dealt more with things like public transit and those kinds of issues, but I think that we saw some of the infighting that took place there, primarily around the kind of regional interests as represented by the various municipalities. And I'm not sure, but I think the finance minister would certainly remember the Metropolitan Authority. I don't know if he ever served on it or not, but it had some fairly significant problems, and I can certainly remember, not as a member of the authority because I never had that position, but certainly as an interested councillor attending those meetings and just amazed at how the smallest of things could get bogged down in the bureaucracy of the way that operated. Now, I think, to be fair, the municipality will say, well, we don't have those interests at stake anymore. That was the point of amalgamation. We no longer have those kind of internal fights going on, because what's at stake here is the overall benefit of the municipality as a whole, and that's why we're asking for this mechanism as an adjunct to the other planning processes that take place on a regional basis. And I understand that argument. I guess what I'm saying is that before we go about, and before that members of the legislature are asked to give their assent to a piece of legislation that is going to cede authority to another another body, I think we have to have a pretty clear idea of just exactly what that would encompass. And frankly, I think that to do otherwise would be irresponsible, and certainly not to raise these questions about it would be a dereliction of our duty to our constituents, because I have a list, Mr. Speaker, as I'm sure many other people do, many other MLAs in this area, of pieces of infrastructure that I would like to see in place in this region. And I believe it is absolutely the case that another piece of significant infrastructure will be needed in and around this municipality, and soon. And I have no doubt that the municipality is going to be calling on the province to either jointly fund it or to completely fund it, or they're going to be looking for some mechanism. And you only have to think about the discussion that's taken place with respect to the proposed toll road that would go from the Sackville area in through Burnside into Dartmouth. And I'm sure certainly the minister is aware, and I know that the speaker is likely aware that that's an item that has been proposed by one of the construction companies here in the province. They've essentially, as I understand it, they threw the idea out there. They said, this is just an idea. We haven't moved beyond that. We're not looking for approvals. We're not doing this. We're just simply saying that this is an idea. And what they know is that road is already planned. In fact, there's already a plan for it. It was indeed planned at the time that Burnside Industrial Park was planned. Because through the planning process, they saw the long-term need in this region of the area. So this is not going to be a surprise to anyone that this is a need that's going to arise. I'm sorry. Question?
The honourable member for Cape Breton West on a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the honourable leader of the opposition accept the
question?
Well, I'm just very interested in what the honourable member has been saying, because what he's saying leads me to believe that there has been absolutely no detail forthcoming, obviously from the province, on the significant issues that he's referred to. But more importantly, there doesn't appear to be any detail coming from HRM. And my question to the honourable member is, has he had any discussion or any detail provided by any officials from HRM, elected or otherwise, that would give us some greater insight onto this legislation? That's hopefully that he could provide.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, I would just refer the member to the transcript from the Economic Development Committee, where municipal officials appeared. As I said, I didn't find it particularly enlightening as to kind of the overall scope, and I'm like him. I'm following that debate as I see it show up in the newspapers, and as I run into members of council, I talk to them about where they see it going. And the reality is that different people have different impressions of where ultimately this authority would go, and that's not unusual or unlikely. And I would like to make the point that I'm in no way trying to be critical of the municipality. I mean, the municipality is seeing what they consider to be a void in terms of transportation planning, and they're simply looking to move into an area of authority that they feel is important to the citizenry of the metropolitan Halifax Dartmouth area, and that's a perfectly reasonable thing for them to do. But the broader question is, does the legislature feel comfortable ceding that kind of authority to the municipality without understanding exactly what it is that we're being asked to do? And I say, frankly, no. It's not that I distrust the members of council. I mean, I know many of them. I served with many of them. I also know that on October 16th, some of them potentially will change. So, I know less about who will be on the council after October 16th. Those are the kinds of questions and what I'm trying to raise, Mr. Speaker, and I'm hoping I'm going to have a bit more time to do this. I know that for today we're looking up, winding up, but I still have some other things I wanted to talk to in terms about overall transportation planning. So I realize instead of launching into a new part of that, if it's okay, I would move to adjourn debate at this point and pick it up tomorrow.
Is it agreed to adjourn debate? Agreed. I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House to now rise to meet again on the morrow at the hour of 9 a.m. and the House will sit from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. The order of business will be public bills for second reading. And, Mr. Speaker, I know that honourable members don't know the numbers of the bills that were introduced today, so I will name the bills rather than give the bills numbers. We will move into the electricity bill, the Highway 104 bill, and the Motor Vehicle Act. And there are amendments to the latter two, and the first one is a new bill, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that, I move the House to now rise.
Motion is to adjourn. Is it agreed? We've reached the moment of interruption. The subject for late debate was presented by the member for Victoria the Lakes. Therefore, be it resolved that the provincial government has neglected rural roads. Recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just for the sake of clarity, I'll reiterate the resolution. Therefore, be it resolved that the provincial government has neglected rural roads. Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no two ways about it that the rural parts of this province have been neglected in terms of road maintenance and upkeep. And there's considerable evidence to support that. The fact that the province is now moving towards a considerable privatization mode in many areas of the province, particularly in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, in Victoria County, in Kings County, and by the way, Mr. Speaker, my colleague from Kings West will share my time because he would like to enlighten some members before the House as to some of the concerns in his area as well. Now, Mr. Speaker, in fairness to the Minister, there have been some general improvements in areas that we haven't seen, and perhaps a more uniform fashion than we've seen in previous days. So I will put that there for the Minister, and I think all things considered, I think fair is fair. But Mr. Speaker, there is a general philosophy and there's a general direction that this government is moving towards, which will lead towards the further deterioration of the maintenance and the quality of roads in rural Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, earlier today the Minister has made reference to the RIM program and the fact that the government is able to now provide the same high quality service using the RIM program at a lesser cost to the taxpayers of Nova Scotia. Well, perhaps there are some cases that that's true, and I would certainly submit that even in my own constituency that's been the case. However, Mr. Speaker, I think the Minister would have to agree that the staff within the Department of Transportation, the different locals, the different union locals in different divisions across the province who are prevented from allowing to put a tender in or bid on certain segments of work within the department or across Nova Scotia is actually kind of precluding any opportunity for the government to realize the fact that maybe they are or maybe they aren't getting full value for dollar. And so I would put that there for the Minister. Mr. Speaker, I heard on the local media just in the last couple of days, for example, down in Victoria County, where the local grader and a snowplow have been removed from down the North River area and for the general servicing in Victoria County. That's a loss That's a loss there, Mr. Speaker. We've seen a reduction in the quality of service to a certain extent. In my own area, for example, now they're looking at privatizing the snow removal and the salting of the roads for the highway route 327 and indeed the Manitou Catalone Highway, which, Mr. Speaker, both these roads are in terrible shape. And I think to allow that to be tendered out, for example, to have one contractor do the plowing and another contractor do the salting, I think could lead to some very difficult situations. Perhaps the minister could enlighten members of the House on the true extent of how far the minister is prepared to go on the contracting out of services, particularly in rural Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, with that being said as well, when this government came to power in 1999, there were 3 major federal-provincial highway agreements. There was the HIP agreement, the Highway Infrastructure Program. There was a SHIP program, the Strategic Highway Improvement Program, and I forget what the acronym is for the third one, but the fact of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that there were 3 programs and now there's only 1. And I would encourage the minister to start moving towards reactivating one of the other 2 major highway agreement programs, because the federal government seems to be, from all indications, willing to move to renew some of these federal-provincial programs. And, Mr. Speaker, why the province is a little slow off the mark on that, I'm not so sure. Maybe it's bogged down on negotiations, maybe not. Mr. Speaker, the government gave an indication in its Blue Book promise of 1999 that 100% of all the automotive and vehicle taxes and revenues would be going towards the roads in Nova Scotia. The minister presented his figures in the last sitting of the legislature that in fact there was more going into that than in fact was being collected. Perhaps the minister again could enlighten us where the issue is with the federal government on this particular issue as well. These are major policy issues that perhaps the minister could speak to. At this point, perhaps I'll allow my colleague from King's West, King's North. King's West. I'm moving around here from riding to riding. But there are so many problems down in Kings County, from what I understand, that I could pick any one of those members and they would speak very eloquently to the problems on roads. But with that, Mr. Speaker, I will turn it over to my colleague from King's West.
Thank you. The honourable member for King's West. You have 4 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly, I appreciate the opportunity to point out a few of the deficiencies that we have seen in our area in regards to the maintenance of rural roads. And certainly, King's West is an entirely rural area of Nova Scotia. And when we see a highway like the 221, which has become enormously important to the agriculture sector, tourism, with a golf course now on that highway, traffic has increased immensely. Also, we have the compost facility, which requires a hardening of the road from the 101 highway to that facility. Again, this summer and probably fall will pass and nothing will happen to that road. And we know that certainly it requires immediate attention as the recycling contractor will have to take 4 trips to the normal 1 once restrictions go on that piece of highway. So with the amount of traffic, the type of traffic, the 221, that section certainly having an upgrade is very, very critical indeed. I think also of a road like the Aylesford Road out to East Dalhousie, which did get some patching this year, which I know the residents appreciated. But again, it was a piece of highway put down during late fall to early winter when frost conditions prevailed. And of course, that highway still is nowhere near perhaps the safest of conditions for a good part of the year. It was very disappointing to also have happened in our area in the end of August, first week of September, to see 10 to 15 workers between Berwick and Inumina's garages who were laid off at a time when fall work, I think, is the very essence of preparing for the winter season. And I know that there's a considerable amount of basic work with the shoulders of the road, with the clearing of the bushes and so forth that need to be accommodated for. So that certainly, again, is another element where maintenance that can prevent a lot of problems for the rural roads in our area, I think can get a boost. So that's obviously we know that there isn't sufficient monies to carry on the work that is required. I think a study last year pointed out that we needed about $364 million going into our roads around the province, and we know that at around $140 million, certainly rural Nova Scotia is in need of the kind of long-range plan where X number of miles in each of the counties are maintained with paving and proper upgrades from one year to the next. So I hope a few of those areas that I have outlined. One further one, which was raised by member opposite, or the member from Pictou West, outlined today, the rim work on the Black Rock Road, which certainly shows that if you don't do a good job, the right job first.
Order. Time has expired. Now recognize the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had really intended to go last if it was possible, simply because I would like to respond to the specific question.
That is agreeable then with the other members. Then I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Doesn't matter. I can talk about rural roads sooner or later, or longer or shorter, because it's an issue that there's no shortage of topics about. But if the minister wishes to go last, that's not a problem. The resolution read that therefore it be resolved that the provincial government has neglected rural roads. And in my opinion, and in the opinion I think of almost all rural members in this House, that resolution is true. Rural roads have been neglected in the province of Nova Scotia and for a long time. And I guess as a rural member from the riding of Pictou West, like many rural MLAs, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure it's the same for yourself, that we get lots and lots of calls from people with concerns over the condition of their secondary roads, and whether it's ditching or graveling or shoulder work, bush cutting, grading, or there's just all kinds of needs out there, and it just keeps on coming day after day, as I'm sure the minister hears from in his own riding as well. And for example, I had a call just a couple days ago about the very poor condition of the Caribou Island Road. It's a gravel road. It extends out into a beautiful area of our Northumberland Strait, and it's washboardy and it needs graded. And it was graded earlier this summer, but it's in poor shape again. And while the cooperation is generally pretty good from our local office in Lions Brook, that's just an example of a need that calls that we're dealing with at our office. So over and over, we're getting calls about the poor condition of our secondary roads. Probably the biggest concern is over paving or lack thereof. And that everything from repaving the whole road to general repair, patching of potholes and cracks in the road, and other needs. One road in particular that I've been pressing for recently, and that I'm hearing quite a bit from constituents, is the Highway 256, which runs from Scottsburn to West Branch. That road has a lot of bad potholes. It's not been patched at all this year, and certainly been in contact with their district supervisor, Mr. Garby, hoping to have that particular road repaired before the real cold weather comes in. So there's a lot of needs, and certainly it was mentioned by the previous speaker, we have a huge deficit in the road needs in this province. It's been estimated a few years ago, the study was done, was $3.5 billion. So that's somewhere around $350 million a year over a 10-year period that would be needed just to bring our roads back up to standard, just to put them into a decent shape so that people would not have to be continually spending out money for repairs on their vehicles. And that's one of the concerns. One of the part of that deficit is well, it's $350 billion, $3.5 billion over 10 years. There's, in addition to that, is the deficit that rural residents pay themselves when they have to go to the garage and get rims fixed on their vehicle, or mufflers or front-end car parts, shocks and struts, and so on. So there's in addition to the deficit that the province has determined for road maintenance, there's also the cost to the individual homeowner or the individual driver. One issue that also, in addition to the cost to the driver, is in our rural communities. People want to improve their communities. They want the best for their community. And in my riding, there's been this past year 2 committees set up to look at economic development and strategic planning. And one was in the Alma, Mount Tom area. They sat down and looked at the strengths that they had in their community, looked at the weaknesses, they looked at the opportunities, and they looked at threats that might have been in their community for the future. And in the first case, in the Alma, Mount Tom area, they identified one of the weaknesses, certainly was the condition of the rural roads. That's hurting the economic activity in the area, especially along Highway number 4, which runs from Salt Springs right through Mount Tom and through to Colchester County into the riding of Colchester North. It's felt by the members of that committee that if money was invested in that rural road, that would help bring more tourists into the area, maybe would help economic development, more businesses that could flourish and grow, and it would build on itself. But the basic infrastructure has to be there initially. So the members of that community from Alma and Green Hill and Salt Springs and Central West River, Mount Tom have identified the weakness there of the infrastructure in that number 4 highway, and they feel that would boost economic activity if that particular road was looked after. Likewise, there's a strategic planning committee now has been struck in the River John area, and they too have looked at their strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. And again, the number 1 weakness that they have identified is the condition of the secondary roads in the River John, Seafoam, Marshville area, including the Sunrise Trail. It has been paved out as far as the Macaulay Road in past Tony River. And for economic development, for improvement in the community, they'd like to see that road paved all the way from the Macaulay Road right through to Colchester County, heading towards Tatamagouche. And other secondary roads in the area too, such as the River John Road and the Cape John Road, and especially the West Branch Road, which runs from the village of River John towards West Branch, is in bad shape. It's really one of the poorer roads out there. So I could go on and mention lots of roads that are in need. I'll mention one other, and that's the White Hill Road back of Westville. Perhaps the minister has heard me speak about it previously. It's about 6 miles from the town of Westville, and I think it was paved around 1981. By 1982, it was starting to get some potholes and cracks. By 1983, it was one of the poorer roads in the county, and I think it was partly because the amount of pavement that was put down was very, very little, and it just went to pieces almost immediately. A rural road should last, many, many more years than that. By 1984, it was done. In 3 years, it was as bad as any road out there, and that was 20 years ago. So you can imagine now what it's like after all those years. I'll mention one other road that and the minister would be familiar with this, is the Granton Road past the Michelin tire plant. Due to unforeseen and circumstances there, the rubberized asphalt program was not able to be carried out this year. We're certainly thankful that the regular pavement was done, and the contractor had done all the preliminary work and got it ready, but it just wasn't coming together, and they just couldn't seem to make the system work for rubberized asphalt. However, talking with the plant manager there, they're certainly very hopeful and would very much like to get the other end of the Granton Road done as an experiment, as a pilot project, to see if that's possible, that would allow a type of paving that would last a lot longer than regular asphalt paving. And it's worked in Ontario, it's worked in South Carolina, and I think it has a lot of potential for long life on our roads, and that's really what we need, is something that's going to last a lot longer than what happened on the White Hill Road, where within 2 or 3 years it was finished, it was all over. So I hope that the minister might be able to consider the Granton Road, the other end of it, perhaps for this pilot project, to see if it does work, and perhaps it can save us money over the long term for other areas of Nova Scotia. So I guess my time is winding down, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say again, though, I think our rural roads need more investment. We need to press the federal government for more of a bigger share of our gasoline tax. We need to make sure we use our dollars wisely, and a pilot project or whatever would be one direction to go. But there's no question there is a huge deficit in roads. Our rural residents are also paying the lion's share of that with damage to their vehicles. And it's hurting our economic development. There are areas that could grow and thrive if they have good rural infrastructure. And it's hurting our tourism. All those things could be overcome if we had a long-term plan for better roads, and I think it would help our whole economic development in rural Nova Scotia. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I'll recognize the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for bringing this resolution forward. In fact, I wish we had one resolution like this every night, because, Mr. Speaker, to be quite truthful, every rural member in this legislature will agree that we need more money for roads, and I think we have to start off by discussing the money situation. The Department of Education today was, the Minister of Education, I should say today, was asked a question about money going into education and whether or not additional money makes for better education programs for our children. And he said, well, he said, quite frankly, he said, we don't exactly equate money with the quality of education. And the same thing applies to health, Mr. Speaker. There's lots of money going into health, but that is not necessarily going to solve the problems that we have in the healthcare system. But I can guarantee you that in the transportation system, more money means better roads, absolutely, because the money goes into infrastructure, it goes into something you can see, something you can measure, and you can say, yes, we have another 5-10 kilometers of road in your area, and you can go out and see that, Mr. Speaker. And on top of that, Mr. Speaker, we're doing something that is going to last for 25 years. And, Mr. Speaker, if we cannot get that particular kind of support across the province, then the money will still continue to go to health, and it will go to education, and it will go to community services. Because when people are asked the question, what is the most important government program that you think should be expended, should have more money, they say health. Just an automatic answer. You go up and knock on their doors, as you have probably done, Mr. Speaker, during election campaign, and you ask them what their concerns are, what their problems are, and they point out their front gate, and they say, fix the road, cure the potholes, pave, build a bridge. That's the kind of thing they want. So, Mr. Speaker, the first thing we have to do is to encourage not only the provincial government, my colleagues in Cabinet, but also the federal government to step up to the plate and provide more money for highways. I said today, when the honourable member for Pictou West was talking about $3.5 million, and I corrected him, and I know he knew what the answer was, that it's about $3.5 billion. $3.5 billion is the amount that we needed to pick up the deficit about 5 years ago. But that deficit is getting bigger and bigger every year. We're not catching up. We need more money, and the money has to come from somewhere, and where's it going to come from? Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we have to do, I think, is to encourage the federal government to return to the province a portion of the gasoline tax that flows out from this province every year. It's about $140 million. Now, Mr. Martin has said, yes, he's going to actually share some of those revenues from motor fuels with the provinces. But however, he has said that when he's returning that money to the provinces, that is going to flow to the municipal units. And that would probably be very fair in a province like Ontario or a province like Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and perhaps Quebec. But in the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't make sense.
The honourable member allow for a question? Yes. Go ahead, the member for Victoria of the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Minister, for taking the question. I just want to, the question is one of, when you mentioned about the federal government stepping up to the plate for more money, I was in contact with Mark Eiking, the minister, the MP in my area, and I questioned him about the funding for the Cabot Trail, and he said that if they come up with more money, the province would have to step up to the plate also. So if he was successful to bring more federal dollars come forward for guaranteed for the Cabot Trail, would the province also match that funds and step up to the plate along with them?
Recognize the honourable member.
The quick answer is yes, but I don't want to dwell on that because I'm wasting my time, to be quite frank, because I don't think that's going to happen. But what I was trying to say, Mr. Speaker, was that the present Liberal government's plan, federal Liberal government's plan, is to take a portion of the federal motor fuel tax and return it to the provinces via the municipalities, via the cities. And Mr. Speaker, in the province of Nova Scotia, that won't work, because I'll tell you why. In the province of Nova Scotia, 90% of the roads in this province are the responsibility of the Department of Transportation. 10% belong to the municipalities and the cities and the towns. You go to Ontario, and it's 10% belongs to the provincial Department of Transportation, and 90% belong to the municipalities and the cities and the towns. When the Minister of Transportation was, Federal Minister of Transportation was down in the province just about a week or 10 days ago, I had a meeting with him and I brought this to his attention. And I must confess, Mr. Speaker, for the first time in my time in the Department of Transportation, I think I found somebody who understood that. And that gives me great happiness from the point of view that I think finally somebody in the federal government understands that in the province of Nova Scotia and in the province of New Brunswick and in the province of Newfoundland that we are different from the point of view of how we maintain our roads and bridges. Where the provincial government, the provincial departments of transportation have the majority of the load to carry. So I think we're getting somewhere. That is more money coming to the province. That's good. But Mr. Speaker, there are other things we can do as well, and one of the things that we can do to assist us getting more work done on our highways, quite frankly, is to use our money more intelligently. Now, I know that there's a lot of discussion out in the rural areas about alternate service delivery, whereby we are asking private contractors to carry out capital work for the province. And this is done primarily through the RIM program, which is an ideal vehicle for the small contractor to start up and get into business, and perhaps later on that same contractor will be able to compete for some of the larger contracts around the province under our general capital program. But Mr. Speaker, the RIM program is providing the Department of Transportation with about an extra 30%. An extra 30% of actual completed highway work over what we would get if we had department forces doing that same work. I'm sorry, the costs of the department doing the work themselves is around about 30% higher than having our own forces do it. So it makes sense that a certain percentage we're going to put out to the private contractors. Mr. Speaker, the RIM program has been a success. We have increased the amount that we put into the RIM program every year since we came into government by approximately $1 million, $1.5 million per year. Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons why we have roads in Nova Scotia that are not up to scratch today is because in 1993, when we went out of power, we were spending $131 million a year on capital expenditures. $131 million on capital. During the next several years, that capital investment in highways went down to $40-odd million. And only now, over the past 4 years, have we started to increase the capital expenditure. And even today, we're only at $120 million approximately. But, Mr. Speaker, at least, Mr. Speaker, every cent that we derive in taxes from motor fuels at the present time is going back into highways. In fact, we're putting in about $10 million more dollars than we are receiving in motor fuel taxes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I say, this is a subject near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure it is to all rural members. Thank you.
Thank you. Time has expired for late debate.